Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It is such a real honor to be here on this particular morning. I was so grateful when Greg asked if I would be willing to speak here on 4th of July weekend, because to me it's a really exciting weekend. And I don't know about you, where you all were. We were up in Glen Ellen, but it was the most robust experience I have ever had around here. I think every person that lives here was out on the street. And I was actually out in my very first parade, which was great fun. I am celebrating an anniversary of my own. A year ago yesterday, I made the decision to finally do something about my health. And I had gone to the doctor and set dates to have my knees replaced. That was a long time ago, many moons ago, but it made all the difference in the world. And part of it is, you know, when the day comes when it's time to let go and to move forward, and that's what I had. And so I'm so deeply grateful that it's this year and not last year. But anyway, it was so much fun to see everybody out there, because what we're celebrating always on 4th of July, Independence Day, is we're celebrating this idea of liberty and the pursuit of happiness and all the things that are promised here in this beautiful United States of ours. The thing I want to talk about today, and the reason I loved choosing Living the Four Agreements, is because to me, until we are free in our minds to know how to think and think well, we really aren't free, are we? You know, we can be so trapped in our beautiful minds, we can put walls up and never get out of there. So being able to work with it is one thing. You know, how many of you have been around this wonderful book, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz? Lots of us have it. How many of you read it in about the last year? I don't think so. Well, you know, it's one of those funny books. The amazing thing about it is it's so simple. These are so simple, these four agreements. What are they? They're written by a man who had his orientation in what's called Toltec wisdom, which is another form of truth teaching. It's an ancient teaching. Four agreements, so simple. It's just be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions. And always do your best. Now, if everybody could just embody that, we could go to coffee. But my talk today is not the four agreements. My talk today is living the four agreements. And it was really interesting because obviously in preparation to be able to provide you with this information today, I had to start looking at them again. We're going to look at them again today, and you will see some things you probably didn't see before. One of the things about being free, Dr. Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, made an amazing statement that stuck with me from the minute I read it. He said, "You are bound because you are first free. The very power that appears to bind us is the only power that can free us." And the master teacher summed it up by saying, "It is done unto you as you believe." As you believe. Well, as you believe is how we think. That's thought. It's not being done unto us as other people believe, although we sometimes think that's true. But when we really begin to work and live out of these four agreements, we are going to see that this idea that life is really happening not to us, but through us, based on how we believe. Talk about simple? Yes. Easy? Not so easy, because of some of the things that have gotten in the way of our belief systems up until now, and that's part of what Don Miguel Ruiz wants to share in his book. The amazing thing about the truth, and any truth, is it's not simple, but it's real. And there's no denomination, there's no philosophy, there's nothing that has a patent on truth. The amazing thing is that you can take all the different denominations around the world, all the theologies, and you can line them up, and there is going to be kernels of truth that runs like a thread through all of them. They're true because they are true. There are not versions of the truth. You know, although we've tried that, I'm sure a lot of us have. It's a riddle of simplicity is actually how the founder also says. He calls it a riddle of simplicity because the simple part of it is understanding it. And then the hard part of it is realizing that we are in the position of actually elevating, as we did in the meditation, elevating our thoughts to a different level than perhaps we were used to and we were trained to do. So I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't think anybody ever told me for a really long time while I was growing up. Some of you grew up in New Thought, but I didn't. And it was only when I got older that somebody said, you know what, don't believe everything you think. I said, what do you mean, don't believe everything I think? I think it's in my head, it must be true. And you know, it's such a little revelation. It was back, I think, in the 70s. I actually heard a man named Shad Homestetter, who wrote a book, What You Say When You Talk to Yourself. Does anybody remember this book? It was the first time I ever got into affirmations. It was the first time I ever tested what it was that I was thinking about. And you know, we think a lot. Have you ever noticed you think a lot? Yeah. I imagine somewhere along the line Greg has told you that somebody once said we spend our time during every day thinking about 60,000 thoughts a day. Who thought that? Who counted those? But you know, can you imagine that the 60,000 thoughts a day are probably not totally unique thoughts? They probably sound an awful lot like the one that came before. Well, if that's the way we do it, that's called repetition, and what comes from repetition is we begin to get that groove that makes us think it's true. And then we build evidence around it, we track evidence of its truth. So the thing about the living the four agreements is we have a real opportunity through this wonderful Toltec wisdom teacher who has a wonderful story, wonderful background himself, Don Miguel Ruiz, who came from a long lineage of mystical Naguals and shamans in the Toltec wisdom. And he wanted to reject all that. He went to medical school. He wanted to be a medical doctor. But you know what happened? One night he woke up. And when he woke up, he was against a wall. He totaled his car. He'd fallen asleep at the wheel. He had two friends with him. He'd had an out-of-body experience, and he was perfectly fine, and so were they. He had a mystical moment that, and this often happens, I don't know, a lot of the books I read, a lot of the teachers I study have mystical moments which turn them around and get them on their track of contribution, and that's what happened with Don Miguel Ruiz. It was at that point that he began to pen and put together the four agreements. He began to live them. And so he was able to put them into such a simple book, and that's what I love about this book too. It's incredibly simple. He begins his book with a chapter called Domestication. He talks about how here on this plane, domestication really is how we all get entrained in the way we think about things. And things that we think about collectively, and other places I've been used words like, well, the law of averages. We've heard of the law of averages, right? And we kind of believe in the law of averages. We've heard of Murphy's Law. We've heard of race, mind, consciousness. We've all heard those things too. And generally speaking, if you open a newspaper or you read a magazine, a typical newspaper or a typical magazine, not one you're going to get here, but if you open them, you will read a lot about what's going on around the world from the perspective of the race mind, from the perspective of domestication. It's through domestication that we believe in war and think there's something appropriate about that. It's from domestication that we feel as if we are missing things, that we don't have enough, that we have lack in our lives. It could be lack of love, it could be lack of money, it could be lack of health, it could be lack of whatever the lack might be, but we all kind of buy into it. And what we do is we share that information with each other. In fact, Carolyn Mace, a lot of you know and read, refers to this sharing as woundology. We share our wounds together, and we nod. The four agreements is really about moving away from, and the meditation we worked with, the songs that we sang, was all about elevating our ideas. It's all about going to a higher consciousness, not hanging out in the domestication of the law of averages. And what I love about the four agreements is it gives you a little blueprint. It actually walks you through how to make those changes. And again, they may not be easy, and they certainly don't feel natural. But what's very funny is what we are doing in domestication is not natural, it's normal. Normal for those of us that are domesticated into race mind. Natural is the highest idea. Natural is really what the first agreement is. The first agreement is be, are you ready? Breathe. Be impeccable with your word. Ugh. Be impeccable. I don't know about you, the first time I read that, I thought I can't even read this book anymore. I don't even know what that means. I might have had a moment of being impeccable, but I certainly not have had an hour or a day of it. But it was only because I didn't know what the word meant. So in the dictionary, the word comes from a Latin word, peccatus. And peccatus actually means sin. So impeccatus would be without sin. So, okay, now we got to deal with sin. Now we got to do the S word here, okay. So what is sin? Well, I love knowing, after all the years of my growing up in a different kind of theology, when I walked into New Thought, I learned that sin was an archer's term. It was an old archer's term. And you have a bullseye, and you got the arrows, and when you aim and you shoot, if you get the bullseye, wow, that's good. But anything beyond the bullseye, outside of it, is called that sinning. That you didn't hit your mark. Wow, doesn't that take a lot of the onus off of that?
Yes.
So you think about your thinking. If your thinking is still in that limited space, well, it's just missing the mark. Or what I love even more than that is in the wonderful book New Earth, where Eckhart Tolle talks about this. He says, sin isn't just missing the mark. He said, it's missing the point. Point of what? Point of unity. Point of being all together. Point of wanting the highest idea for ourselves. Point of wanting to have an extraordinary life, not just get through the day. Not just be a consumer, but a contributor. Not just being a person who's feeling impinged upon, or that life is happening to me, but that life is happening through me. And this is really the juicy, wonderful news here in New Thought. This is about being impeccable. It's about using our word in a way that is uplifting and contributes, not just to ourselves, but first to ourselves, and then out to others. We fill ourselves up, and then we can extend out. Isn't that a nice way to think about it, being impeccable with our word? In the Bible it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So however we use this wonderful, beautiful mind of ours to think the thoughts we think, we are entitled to do that. But to the degree we think in a more uplifted and lofty way, and remember, we get to choose. Nobody's going to get inside my head without my permission. But if I kind of conk out and get a little, fuzzy, they say, if you aren't using your mind, somebody else is. And advertisers count on it, right? So it's about the idea that we can really stand good stewards at the door with that idea of trying to raise our thoughts. And it's not going to be perfect every day, and that's okay. It will be sufficient unto the day. And then tomorrow we'll have that next experience. It's about not gossiping. It's about not saying those things about others, because remember what we've heard, we're supposed to love our neighbors how?
As ourselves.
As ourselves. Well, here's the little secret. If you want to go down the rabbit hole a little bit, they are ourselves. If there's only one of us here at the level of the absolute, and we attract to us our experiences, well, there we are. There's our perfect mirror. Isn't that interesting? And whatever we see in other people, as my friend used to say, hey, if you spot it, you got it. So I'm going to tell you the parable of the Segway here so you can see a little bit about how you do the balance on this. I finally made a commitment to myself come real this year. I actually got on a Segway a couple of weeks ago and rode down Michigan Avenue and along the lakefront and up the bump on Soldier Field. And this was pretty daring. This was a really big thing for me. So I always thought this would be great fun until the minute they put the Segway in my hands and I'd watch the video, and I got a little nervous. A little scary. Fortunately, I had them tell me how to get off in the event that I needed to do so. But anyway, off we went, this little trooping group, 6 of us, down across the street, over around the waterfront, and by Buckingham Fountain. Is it Buckingham Fountain? Yes. Okay, remember. And and this is also the day before the Super Cup thing that the whole city was like down. So it was a very interesting day to go segwaying. But what the thing about segways How many of you have been on a Segway? Oh, you are so right in there. This is our adventure club here. But the thing about them is you stand on them and you have handles and you have to lean, and as you put pressure, your feet put pressure and you lean forward, it makes them go. And the more you lean and more foot pressure you put on it, the faster you go. That sounds easy. It sounds like truth. And then if you want it to break, you don't have a break, you have to lean back and then you just sort of balance. So here we are. This is now an exercise in balance. So the key to this, though, is balance has to be balanced. And these are intuitive. It's not something where if you work against it, it's going to work anyway. So here we are going up our first major hill, and I'm beetle bomb in the back usually the whole time. So I'm leaning far forward, and we're going up this hill. The problem was my Segway was going backwards. I'm not supposed to do that. and thankfully, I had figured out how to step off and got that worked out. So my coach came over, and here's what I was doing. I was leaning forward, but I was resisting and putting my heels back. So I was literally braking and leaning forward. I thought, well, isn't that a metaphor for life? You know, how many times have you been stepping on your own toes, wondering why the water won't flow? It's about this impeccability of our words. So it's really about being able, the thing about impeccability is really also about being able to be present to the situation. To know enough, we were just talking about this, to know enough about going ahead, seeing ahead, but being able to stay present into any situation. And know that when we step off, that we have stepped off with integrity. So, let's affirm. I think you're ready to use it for the word now. I choose to be impeccable with my words. I choose to be impeccable with my words. Feels okay now, right? Because we know what it means. So, ready to take on agreement number 2? Okay, here we go. Don't take anything personally. Okay. Now, you know, the thing about not taking anything personally is that it really isn't personal. I love Terry Cole Whitaker's book. Many of you might remember years ago, she wrote a book. And it came right on the heels of some 70s book I remember where they wrote, women need men like fish need a bicycle. That made no sense to me at all. Then she follows it up with this one about what you think of me is none of my business. Oh, yeah. You know, wouldn't that feel like, you know, wouldn't that feel good? Well, my sequel to that one is, what you think of me is none of my business. But what I think you think of me is everything. And I'm working with it every single day. Why? Because I'm so used to taking things personally. And this really becomes that heaven and hell we live with, doesn't it? The idea that we are so concerned what other people think about us. And what's really funny is what they think about us really, honestly, isn't about us at all. It's always about them. Just like what we think of other people is about us, not about them. So this is one of those that we can just work with constantly. Where am I feeling that I need to take things personally? Because when we feel it, therein lies our work. If we want to do the work, if we want to see what we're feeling, if we want to see where our pain is. My minister in California used to get massages, and she would be getting massaged, and her masseuse would push on her hard. She'd go, "Ow, you're hurting me." And her masseuse would say, "No, Helen, I'm not hurting you. I'm pushing your pain. The pain is in you, and I'm just pushing it." So one of the things about not taking things personally is we can actually use it as information that we can take within so that we can begin to do the healing, because something's getting pushed in us by someone else that has nothing to do with them. But what if we actually believed we attracted it? That's that elevated idea, because now instead of it being a fault, it becomes an ability to respond, or known as our responsibility. Now we can respond and we can see, what is it in me that I want to change? What is it in me that I want to heal? Because, you know, we're ruthless. We can be ruthless in our own minds, I think. I wrote a poem years ago, and I'll just tell you the very beginning. Do you have a committee? Do you guys have committees? Oh, okay. It says, "The committee in my head convenes to render judgment on my dreams. In sentences they mumble jumble nocturnally to keep me humble." And then it goes on, and it's a shame-based kind of thing. But at the end, it says, they say to me, now, off in suffering silence go. And the last line is, I have myself who needs a foe. So this week, watch your committee. Watch your committee and see how many people outside may say things too that you might want to make be about them, but you have healing to do if you're having these thoughts, because the thoughts you're thinking, going back to number one, aren't impeccable. You want to go back to thinking loving thoughts, kind thoughts, contributing thoughts, non-gossipy thoughts, about yourself too, not just about other people. Number three, don't make assumptions. This is a good one. The way you don't make assumptions, you can ask questions. When people tell you something, you can ask a question about it. If somebody comes, well, let's just go back to the old fairy tale. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. How do we know? Because it was Chicken Little's had the drop on the head and discerned that the sky was falling. So he went and told Henny Penny that the sky was falling. We all know this story, right? Oh, good. Okay, very old story. But he felt that tap on the head. He made a conclusion that the sky was falling, scared him. He went and found somebody else and began to create a committee of people around him that they could tell, because the sky was falling. This is the worst thing that could happen. They got to go tell the king that the sky is falling. How many of us have had those times where we think the economy is crashing? The real estate market is bad. There's no good men or women out there. Why? Because we've been told these things. We've been domesticated to believe these things. Things that we have been terrorized by, even in our own minds. We get scared of things because we think about them. This is about making assumptions, and of course we've heard that, assume is making an out of you and me when we make assumptions. So how do we not make assumptions? Well, we ask questions. We can actually say, who said the sky is falling? What's the evidence we have of that? Or we can begin to do that work ourselves. We can look inside and see, rather than just begin to continually create the environment of sharing that information that may or may not have facts or truth behind it. It's actually a technique of mind viruses called memeing, M-E-M-E. We meme ideas one to each other. And they can be good memes too. We do some memeing here in this church, don't we? The ideas are creative. There's only one power, one presence, God the good. A lot of the ideas that we meme and we share here together, we buy into. We also, though, think well and spend time learning about what it is we should be thinking about. I was sharing with the group at 9 o'clock, one of my favorite examples of how this thing happened was back in the 70s. It's a perfect example of how we meme ideas to each other. And I don't know about you guys, I used to watch Johnny Carson back when Johnny Carson was on the Tonight Show. Here's Johnny, right? And he had a monologue that he would do, as they all do, every night. One of his writers came up with some little news article that said something about they were experiencing some shortage of toilet paper in some area, government or something. And so Johnny Carson began to make a monologue joke about toilet paper shortage. Do anybody remember this? 24 hours later in California, we did not have toilet paper. It was hidden in basements. Well, we don't have basements there. It was hidden in attics. It was hidden back behind closet doors. We literally had no toilet paper. Why? Because the sky is falling. And everyone made assumptions that it was true. Well, the thing about it is, when I looked this up on Wikipedia because I wanted to give you a little more information. What happened is this was going on at the time we were having gas rationing and we had shortage of gas. And I don't know about how it was here, but in San Diego there was a lot of fear. A lot of gas lines and a lot of fear of scarcity, which is a memed idea, right? So it fell in perfectly into that. Of course, Johnny Carson had lots of egg on his face. He had to deal with quite a bit after that. But it made for a good story because it sure did feel real to a lot of people for a period of time, particularly the ones who didn't get there before the toilet paper was gone. Go find the Sears catalog, I guess. I don't know how they dealt with it. So here's an interesting affirmation for not making assumptions. For doing our own inner work to move beyond and to go back into our impeccability. How about we affirm, I benefit from what you are expressing. That's right. I benefit from what you are expressing. Doesn't mean I have to believe what you're expressing, but I benefit by doing my own work around it. Do you see the difference? Great. So the last one is really pretty basic. The last one is always do your best. You know, all three of these lead up to always do your best. The key here is don't see always do your best as being an assumption of perfectionism. Perfectionism is the opposite of doing our best. Perfectionism is shame-based, because if we are thinking we have to be absolutely perfect, we are in a situation of constant need to compare and be better and better. Why? Because we don't think we're good enough now. Being our best is just simply getting up every single day and being in that place of choosing our thoughts with care. You know, our thoughts are prayers. We're always praying. Be aware of what we're saying. My word is my wand. Watch where I wave it. It goes out from me and comes back again as my experience. Why? Because it is done unto me as I believe. So this idea about being perfect, perfectionism, it's a hustle. And it will never get us to doing our best. Doing our best comes from that wellspring of spirit that knows that I do the highest and greatest good for me to support my well-being. And in so doing, it comes, overflows, and does the highest and good for others. Why? Because we do unto others as we do to ourselves. So let's affirm, I allow myself to always do my best. Let's hear that one. I allow myself to always do my best. Let me conclude, and then we'll have a short prayer on this. But Byron Katie makes a statement. She says, life really is simple. Everything happens for you, not to you. Everything happens at exactly the right moment, neither too soon nor too late. You don't have to like it. It's just easier if you do. So I'd like to end and actually read today's beautiful daily word as our closing treatment. If you'd like to close your eyes. And today, again, is founded on the concept of thought. Let's take a nice deep breath. I choose thoughts that produce good. Thoughts are continually passing through my mind. I pause for a moment and see them as captions on a screen. I notice those that are kind, loving, and creative. They're the foundation for positive action in my life. Healthy thoughts create healthy habits. If I am having hopeless or hostile thoughts, I refuse to give them any power at all. I notice these thoughts, but I know they are not the truth. I open to God's healing energy to relieve any fear behind the negative thinking. I affirm, I open my mind to spirit, and I am illumined by divine ideas. Life-affirming, spirit-filled thoughts, creative, positive energy are all my affairs. As I choose loving and creative thinking, I witness the good that inevitably results. Thank you, God. And so it is. I invite you to just take a deep breath. And as you release, be aware of the thought you are thinking now. Jesus said we go into our chamber and pray in secret. Right here, right now, each of us is in our chamber. For within our mind, we are free, completely and absolutely free, to think in any way that we choose. Our thoughts are prayers. We're always praying. What are we praying? Are we seeking a higher consciousness? What does that mean? I lift up my eyes unto the hills, from which cometh my strength. We elevate our thoughts now to that which is beautiful, to what is life-affirming, to what brings us joy and kindness, connection, compassion, starting with ourselves and working outward, compassion. We rise higher in thought. We release any limited idea and replace it with the possibility of something even greater. The mind of God is infinite, all possible, all powerful. Nothing is too good to be true. And quietly in your mind you affirm, my mind and God's mind are one mind now. In my mind, nothing is too good to be true. This is freedom. This is the pure power of thought. It is always with you. And regardless of what happened last night, today is a new day. Filled with pure possibility. For through God, all things are possible. Still, we allow our minds to rise further. We imagine that there is no separation now between us and everyone else. It is as if we are immersed in an ocean of oneness. Each of us a perfect wave. And as we elevate our thought, it is as if the waterline rises. For as the tide rises, all boats rise. What we think matters. Our thoughts are prayers. Truly, we are always praying. How good it is to know what we prayed through this consciousness of life, of unconditional lovingness and possibility. All available. And we court the realization that we are the beloved. The very spirit of life is well pleased with us. How grateful we are to know this. How glad we are to know that we matter. And we release these words now into a mind that knows how to take this abstract idea and turn it into our beautiful living day, moment by moment. We choose to have an extraordinary experience today. you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. We affirm together. And so it is.